Okay, now in this video, I want to talk about the topic, I believe it is 4.3, describe the organization, functions, characteristics of the stock market and the foreign exchange market. Two very different things. So let's talk about it. First, let's talk about the stock market. What is a stock? A stock is a share of ownership in a company. Okay, there are basically several ways in which a firm can borrow money. Of course, businesses, they need to raise money to operate. Of course, a first way in which a firm can collect money is by borrowing. Okay, either by taking out loans, this is one possibility, or by selling bonds. Bond is simply an IOU, like a piece of paper that's, let's say something like, I owe you $10 million. I will pay back the full amount in 10 years. And in the meantime, every year, I will pay you 2% of the amount borrowed. Something like that. That's a bond. But of course, whoever purchases the bond, so basically whoever lends me money, does not own my company. It's just owns the promise that I will pay back, but the person does not own the company. Another way in which we can raise money is to sell stocks. And in fact, the main advantage when we sell stocks is that we don't have to pay back, okay? But we have to give up part of ownership. So imagine that I start my business myself. So I start the business with my own savings, let's say $100,000. I start my business. So of course, basically, if I start with my own money, it is as if I purchases all the stocks myself because I own the company with my own money. And of course, the company will not pay back. It's not a loan. I came up with my own money. Now, what if I realize that I need more money? I could borrow, I could sell bonds, but I can also sell stocks. So something like say, okay, look, my business is flourishing, it's going well, I need more money. Who's interested? Who would like to lend me an additional, or who would like to, let's put it differently, who would like to own 50% of the company? And in exchange, you just have to give us that $100,000. Okay, so whoever is interested gives or pays $100,000, and now this person owns 50% of the business. Which means that whenever we make profits, for example, this person will be entitled to receiving 50% of the profits that we make. And the amount of profit that we give to the shareholders, this is how we call people who own stocks or shares, we call those dividends. Dividends, which are paid either twice a year or once a year, it depends. This is like the certain amount of profit that you receive. So if I make $1 million in profit and I own 10% of the company, then I may receive up to $100,000, 10% of the profit. Careful, because the profits are not always given to the shareholders. The profits can also be used to invest. Let's say to buy a new factory or stuff like that, but a fraction of the profits will be distributed to the shareholders. So the main advantage from the firm's perspective is that it's not a loan, we don't have to pay back. The main disadvantage is that we have to share the ownership of the company with whoever contributes. Right. Something that is very important to understand whenever we talk about the stock market is that there are two markets. So let's represent it like this. So you have a firm, and then there are two markets. There is a primary market, and there is a secondary market. Basically, The primary market is where we trade new stocks. So let's say again, this firm say, I have an interesting product, but I need more money. So I'm going to sell more stocks. Okay, I'm going to share the ownership of my company with more people. So this firm is going to go to the primary market and say, all right, so who wants to purchase those new stocks? But usually in the primary market, so again, this is when we trade new stocks, you can't really go as an individual or even as like a small bank. You don't do that. Usually in the primary markets, these institutions who buy those new stocks are big banks that we call investment banks, like Goldman Sachs or like JP Morgan, like those big investment banks, and they directly trade with the firm. And of course, they give money. Let's say JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, a big investment bank, is going to purchase the stock from the fund, the new stock, and of course the fund is going to give a piece of paper that says, all right, well, you own 10%, 20% of the company now. Congratulations. So whenever a firm is selling a stock to usually an investment bank in the primary market, of course the firm is going to get money. But then these investment banks, they usually don't keep stocks for long. Usually what they do is that they resell them, because of course, once you have purchased a stock, it does not mean that you are forced to remain the owner of those shares until the end of times, right? You can resell those stocks because there is a secondary market, and the secondary market is where we trade, let's say, second-hand stocks. So in the secondary market, you don't directly buy from the firm, okay? You buy from someone who has already purchased a stock. So in this case, well, let's say it means that someone like the investment bank can sell the stock to someone in the secondary market and would receive money in return. But clearly the money does not go to the firm. The firm has already collected the money. The firm is no longer involved. The firm has already sold the stock, and now the investment bank who had initially purchased the stock from the firm is just reselling the stock to the secondary market. And then again, the investment bank no longer has to do anything with this the next trades of that stock. But then in the secondary market, there are plenty of people who just buy and sell the same stocks, and the same stock can be traded thousands of times over just a single year or over a few years, right? And you know, when you hear something about like the New York Stock Exchange or like the London Stock Exchange or there are so many places in the world, like some financial places where stocks are being exchanged. Well, and we in fact call them stock exchanges because that's a place where we exchange stocks. Well, we're mostly talking about secondary markets for people. So it could be you, an individual, could be a business, could be a commercial bank, for example. Anyone can, in fact, can purchase stocks, even though there are certain regulations in some countries that prevent commercial banks from purchasing stocks because it's regarded as risky, and there are some regulations that just prevents this type of trades. And then the secondary market, of course, you can buy and sell stocks either directly or you could go through like a broker. A broker is someone who's gonna help you to make a trade, okay? Because they have access to certain okay, just let's say that they are professionals, intermediates that help you to trade stocks in the market. Right, I'm not going to enter into the detail. What is the main purpose of the stock market? Because at the end of the day, this is what the question is about. Well, as you can imagine, it is to provide funds to businesses, at least in the primary market, right? For firms to be able to raise the funds that they need to finance investment, not by borrowing, but by just sharing the ownership of the company. Something that is important that should be mentioned is that buying a share is something that can be regarded as a bit risky. Well, first because the value of the share changes over time, of course, depending on how well or how poorly a company is doing. So there is a greater element of uncertainty when you buy, let's say, if you buy a government bond, the element of risk tends to be lower because you know for sure how much you're going to receive every year until the bond matures. But there is another reason for which buying a stock is a bit risky. That's in the case where the company goes bankrupt. Because in case the company goes bankrupt, first it must pay back all of its loans. And then, if there is any money back, will pay back the shareholders. If there is money back, we say that the shareholders, they are the residual claimants. Basically, you can claim money if there is money back. Once we have paid back all the people who have lent us money. So, of course, that's an additional element of risk. The secondary market is very important because it increases liquidity. We've already talked about liquidity, the liquidity of an asset, the ease with which it can be converted into cash, but just imagine there were no secondary market. So imagine if there were only a primary market. So the firm needs money, it sells stock to someone in the primary market, and if there are no secondary market, it means that whoever has purchased the stock to begin with has to keep it forever. Well, as you can imagine, in that case, very few people would be willing to buy stocks because it's a pretty big commitment buying a stock and having to keep it forever. So it would be very hard for businesses to be able to find people who are willing to buy stocks and who are therefore willing to finance the development of a company. So the existence of a secondary market makes stocks much more liquid. Okay, I bought a stock in the primary market, but if I want to resell it because I need cash, I can, because there is a secondary market where I can do that. Okay, I think these are the key things that you should explain about the stock markets. Yeah, that's it. Now, foreign exchange markets or Forex. Forex. But remember, it stands for foreign exchange market. It's a market, or in fact, it's a group of markets because there are plenty. It's a group of markets where we trade currencies, one currency for another. Okay. So, for example, you have one market where you can exchange US dollars for euros, where you have, I don't know, euros for Swiss francs. I don't know, like the Chinese national yuan or the Great Britain pound. So these are just these type of market where we trade currencies. Why does this matter? Well, because we live in a global economy. We live in a global economy, and therefore there are a lot of international transactions. An international transaction is a transaction between two parties that live in different countries, and often, not always, but often, the two countries use different currency. Again, it's not necessarily the case. Think about the euro, the eurozone. There are many different countries who use the euro, but outside of the eurozone, international transactions involve two parties from two countries using two currencies. And therefore, of course, it is important to be able to acquire the currency from the country from which we want to buy. I repeat, because it's important. If I want to buy something from another country, I need to buy the currency from that country. And that's why when you go on a holiday to another country, let's say you go to the US, that's why you buy US dollars. Because you know that once you're there, you will need to pay in US dollars. But in fact, same thing if you want to buy something online. Okay, let's say that, and as an example, a few a few months ago, I purchased some clothes from Sweden. And in Sweden, if I remember well, they use the Swedish krona, I believe, not the euro. For sure, not the euro. And I paid with my debit card, which is on my French bank account. So it seems like it's in euro. But careful, of course, when I pay with my debit card, what my bank does is that it uses my money to buy Swedish krona, to buy the Swedish currency, and then it pays the seller in Sweden with Swedish krona. Okay, so it's really important to understand that. Whenever you want to buy something from another country that uses another currency, the first thing you have to do is to buy the foreign currency. So we need a market. We need a market where we can trade one currency for the other. So just to continue my example, where I bought some clothes from Sweden, if we think about it in terms of supply and demand, when I did that, when I bought something from abroad, I demanded Swedish krona. And in order for me to obtain Swedish krona, I had to sell euros. Okay, I exchanged euros for Swedish krona. So I gave euros, I supplied euros to the Forex. And I demanded Swedish krona from the Forex. So the Forex is always a place where you go, you bring a certain currency, and you receive another currency in exchange. And basically, if you think about a currency, let's take the Swiss franc, for example, who demands Swiss francs? People abroad who want to buy Swiss goods, services, or assets. Anybody in another country who wants to buy Swiss stuff needs to demand Swiss francs. And who supplies Swiss francs? Anybody in Switzerland who wants to buy something in another country. Supply just means that what you give, okay? Demand is what you get. So if you live in Geneva and you want to buy a British car, okay, so you have to pay in pounds, so you will supply Swiss francs and you will demand the Great Britain pound. You will give Swiss francs and in exchange you will receive the Great Britain pound. Another example, if someone in Japan wants to buy an American watch, why not? This person in Japan will supply his or her own currency, so will supply Japanese yen, and in exchange will receive US dollars. Okay, and in fact we can represent it graphically. Let's take the Swiss franc, why not? So here we have the quantity of Swiss francs. CHF is for Swiss franc. And of course, on the vertical axis, and it's very important that you label it properly. And in fact, I think you told me that you've never done this diagram, so let's do it. Just like in any supply and demand diagram, on the vertical axis, we should have the price of 1 Swiss franc, basically, okay? But of course, we need to express the price of 1 Swiss franc in terms of another currency. So then you can choose. Let's say that we want to express the price of 1 Swiss franc in terms of euros. So it's basically the number of euros that we need per Swiss franc. So it's the price of 1 Swiss franc per Swiss franc in terms of euro, the number of euros you need to buy 1 Swiss franc. And that's what we call the exchange rate. That's how you label. I think the question was, you know, like explain the floating exchange rate, blah, blah, blah. That's essentially the type of diagram that you do. So the quantity of Swiss franc and the price of 1 Swiss franc. And just like in any market, there is a supply of Swiss franc and there is a demand for Swiss franc. Again, the demand for Swiss francs comes from everybody abroad who wants to buy Swiss goods, services, assets. They need to pay in Swiss francs, so they need to acquire this currency. And the supply of Swiss francs comes from Swiss residents who want to buy goods and services abroad, so they need to obtain foreign currencies, and so they have to give their own currency to obtain the foreign currency. And of course, the interaction of supply and demand will determine an equilibrium quantity, but honestly, we don't really care about the quantity. But most importantly, this is what it's going to determine the equilibrium exchange rate, XR, for exchange rate. And that's how it works in a floating exchange rate system, where the exchange rate is entirely determined by the market forces of supply and demand. So that's about it for the exchange rate, for the Forex. You understand that it's important because we live in a global economy, and sometimes we buy stuff that is denominated in another currency. So we need to buy this foreign currency. So we need a place to do that. It's important that you recognize who supplies the currency and who demands a currency. Why? And it's also important that you're able to draw this diagram. Be very careful when you label your axis, okay, to make sure you get it right, and to show how the equilibrium exchange rate is determined in this type of market. That's about it. Yeah, that's it.